first monster I met was a slime the size of a watermelon, and everyone around me acted like it was a walking bag of free experience. The meadow outside the beginner town was full of players sprinting around with wooden swords, shouting like heroes, and bullying anything that bounced, crawled, or breathed. Slimes popped like soap bubbles. Goblins got chased into trees. Skinny wolves were beaten with training spears before they even got close enough to bite. Every time a monster died, light flew into the killer's body, and the crowd cheered like they had just won a war. I stood there with a rusty net, a cracked dagger, and the worst starting skill I had ever seen. Capture. That was it. No fireball, no sword aura, no healing light, no storm of arrows, just a glowing rope symbol on my palm and a skill description so short it felt like an insult. Allows the user to capture weakened monsters. The word weakened was doing a lot of work there. It meant I had to fight the monster first, survive, not accidentally kill it, then land the skill while it was still moving. And even if I succeeded, the monster would not become some legendary beast. It stayed what it was. A slime stayed a slime. A goblin stayed a goblin. A wolf stayed a wolf. At first, I thought I had been cursed by bad luck. Then a player beside me smashed a slime with a club, gained 1 level after 10 kills, and complained that the field was too crowded. That was the moment my brain made a tiny clicking sound. Everyone here was seeing monsters as one-time coins. I saw something else. I crouched in the grass and watched the next slime wobble past. It was not aggressive. It kept absorbing dead leaves and small bones, dissolving them as it moved. When it crossed over a patch of poisonous mushrooms, the green spores vanished inside its body, and the grass behind it looked cleaner. Nobody noticed. They were too busy farming. I threw a pebble at the slime, lured it toward a shallow ditch, then stepped on its side with one boot. The slime wrapped around my ankle, cold and sticky. My health dropped by 1 point, then another. Someone laughed behind me. Look, Ethan is losing to pudding. I did not answer. I waited until the slime pulsed from blue to pale gray, then slammed my palm down. Capture. A glowing rope wrapped around it. The slime trembled, shrank, and rolled into a clear bubble with a tiny mark floating inside. Monster captured. No level up, no shining reward, no applause. Just one slime bouncing at my feet, staring at me without eyes. The player who had laughed wiped slime off his own boots and smirked. Great job, you have a pet trash bag. The others laughed too. I smiled because the slime had already cleaned every poisonous mushroom around my legs without me asking. That was my first employee. By sunset, most players had gained 2 or 3 levels. Grant had gained 5. Everyone knew Grant because he made sure everyone knew him. He had taken a warrior class, found a party fast, and spent the whole day killing monsters in the middle of the field where the spawns were thickest. He had sharp blonde hair, a huge training sword, and the kind of confidence that made people move out of his way even when they hated him. When I returned to town with 3 captured slimes bouncing behind me, Grant looked at my level and laughed so hard he nearly dropped his sword. Still level 1, he said. You spent the entire day collecting floor jelly. A few players gathered around. They wanted someone to mock, and I was glowing like a target. I looked at Grant's boots. They were stained purple from poison spores. Your health is ticking down, I said. He looked at his status, cursed, and bought a cheap antidote from a vendor. I had no coins, no levels, and no proper weapon, but I had 3 slimes, and the town's eastern drain was clogged with rot, dead rats, and poison fungus. No player wanted to clean it because it gave no experience. The town guard wanted it done because the smell was making people faint. So while Grant drank medicine and showed off his level, I walked to the drain, pointed at the filth, and whispered, "Eat." The slimes bounced in. 10 minutes later, the rotten sludge was gone. 20 minutes later, the poison fog stopped leaking into the street. 30 minutes later, the guard paid me 5 silver and gave me free bread because he thought I had saved the neighborhood. The slimes came out twice as big. And I learned my second rule. Dead monsters gave experience once. Living monsters got better with use. Next morning, I used the 5 silver to buy a bundle of cheap rope, a sack of spoiled vegetables, and the ugliest wooden shield in the shop. The shopkeeper tried to sell me a better dagger, but weapons were for people planning to kill things. I needed things that made monsters weak, angry, stuck, or curious. Outside town, goblins were the next big target. Players hated goblins because goblins ran away, threw rocks, and screamed insults that sounded personal even when no one could understand them. They were small, quick, and annoying. Most players killed them on sight because a goblin ear could be sold for copper. I watched a group chase a goblin pack into the woods. They charged straight after them and stepped on 3 tripwires in a row. A log swung down, a net popped up, mud exploded under their boots. The goblins shrieked with laughter from the branches. The players blamed the goblins for being cowards. I blamed the players for being boring. Traps meant planning, planning meant workers. I set my spoiled vegetables in a little pile beside an old stump, tied the rope around the shield, and hid behind a bush with one slime in my arms. It smelled like old mushrooms and wet socks, but by then I was used to it. Goblin crept out 10 minutes later. It had a chipped knife, a torn leaf hat, and the suspicious look of a creature born knowing everyone wanted to stab it. It poked the vegetables. I yanked the rope. The shield flipped up, smacked the goblin under the chin, and sent it tumbling into a puddle. Before it could stand, the slime bounced on its head like a sticky helmet. The goblin ran in circles, slipped, and slammed into the stump. I touched its shoulder. Capture. The glowing rope wrapped around it. Monster captured. The goblin stood up, blinked, looked at me, looked at the vegetables, and immediately tried to steal the rest. So captured monsters did not become polite. Good to know. I captured 2 more before lunch, not by beating them, but by letting them beat themselves. One fell into a leaf-covered hole because it was chasing a shiny copper coin tied to a string. Another got stuck trying to pull my empty backpack out from under a rock. By evening, I had 3 slimes and 3 goblins. Still level 1. Still mocked. But I had a team. I brought them to a broken watchtower outside town that no one used because the roof had caved in and wolves prowled nearby at night. The town guard said I could sleep there if I survived. He laughed when he said it. I did not laugh. I gave the goblins sticks, stones, rope, and a simple command. Build something that hurts people who come close. Their eyes lit up like I had complimented their mothers. By nightfall, the broken watchtower had 3 mud spike pits, 2 swinging rocks, a warning rattle made of bones, and a fake door that dropped a bucket of slime on anyone who pushed it. The slimes cleaned the floor. The goblins argued over trap placement. I slept in the only dry corner with my dagger in my hand. At midnight, wolves came. The bone rattle shook. A gray shape jumped through the fake door and got a bucket of slime on its face. It yelped, slipped, and crashed into a mud pit. 2 more wolves rushed in after it and got tangled in rope. The goblins screamed from the rafters and threw stones like tiny drunken kings. I crawled from my corner, grabbed the first trapped wolf by the scruff, and used capture before it could tear my face off. It fought harder than the goblins. The glowing rope snapped once, then twice. My mana dropped so fast my vision flickered. Then the wolf stopped struggling. Monster captured. The other 2 wolves froze when the first one sat beside me. I did not understand wolf language, but I understood pack behavior. I stood behind my captured wolf, pointed at the trapped ones, and let my new monster growl. They lowered their heads. By sunrise, I had 3 wolves. And I had not killed a single monster. That morning, players came to hunt near the watchtower and found the grass clean, the poison gone, the goblin traps marked with little skull signs, and 3 wolves sitting in a perfect line while goblins repaired the wall. Grant arrived with a party and stared at my base like it personally offended him. You're still level 1, he said. True, I said. He pointed at the goblins. Those are weak. True. He pointed at the slimes. Those are useless. Very true. One of my slimes burped out a clean silver spoon it had found in the drain. Grant's smile twitched. He stepped closer to the tower. A goblin pulled a string. A wooden board flipped up under his boot, and a pouch of purple dust exploded in his face. Not poison, just crushed stink mushroom. Grant's party gagged. Someone laughed. Grant's face went red. I looked at the goblins. Too much dust. They nodded like serious engineers. That was the first time the laughter around me sounded different. It was still laughter, but some of it was aimed at Grant. I liked that sound. For the next week, I became the strangest player near the beginner town. Other players left at dawn to kill monsters, then returned at night tired, wounded, and proud of their levels. I left with empty sacks and returned with living problems that became solutions. Slimes cleaned poison and digested waste into fertilizer. Goblins built traps, fences, bridges, and terrible little inventions that worked more often than they should have. Wolves scouted the woods and warned me before enemies arrived. I captured more by using the ones I had. A slime could weaken a goblin without killing it. A goblin trap could pin a wolf without breaking its legs. A wolf could chase a kobold into a pit without biting too deep. Monsters were not loyal because I was charming. They were loyal because capture tied them to my command, and because I fed them, protected them, and gave them work that matched their instincts. A goblin did not want a speech about friendship. A goblin wanted permission to build a trap that threw mud at taller people. A slime did not want glory. A slime wanted a swamp full of nasty things to eat. A wolf did not want to carry bags. A wolf wanted to run, hunt, and be told it was the fastest shadow in the forest. I learned fast. If I ordered a monster against its nature, it moved slowly and wasted energy. If I turned its nature into a job, it became brilliant. That was my third rule. Do not force a monster to act human. Make humans regret underestimating monsters. The first real test came when the northern mine collapsed. A party of new players had gone inside to kill kobolds. They wanted ore, loot, and levels. The kobolds wanted to keep their cave. The players chased them too deep, triggered something, and the tunnel came down. By the time I heard the news, people were shouting outside the mine entrance. The town guard could not go in because poison gas was leaking from the cracks. High-level players refused because rescue work gave low rewards and the trapped party was not worth dying for. Grant stood near the entrance with his arms crossed, pretending to think. I arrived with 6 slimes, 7 goblins, 3 wolves, and a cart full of rope. Grant gave me a look. What are you going to do? Send pudding into a cave? Yes, I said. The crowd laughed. Then my slimes slid into the poisonous gas and started absorbing it. The laughter died one throat at a time. Goblins crawled after them, tapping the walls with sticks and listening for hollow spaces. They were terrible at standing still, but underground they became little gods of narrow tunnels. They found air pockets. They found weak stone. They found the first trapped player by following the sound of panic crying. The wolves stayed outside and guarded the exit because the smell of blood had drawn cave bats. I did not dig with strength, I dug with greed. I ordered the goblins to build a chute from broken shields and boards. I poured old vegetable scraps inside. The trapped kobolds smelled food and started digging from their side, thinking they were stealing from us. They cleared half the tunnel for free. When the first kobold popped through, holding a rotten cabbage-like treasure, a slime landed on its back, and I captured it before it could scream. The captured kobold stared at me with wide yellow eyes. I pointed at the blocked tunnel. Dig there, get food. It understood enough. By midnight, 3 trapped players crawled out alive, covered in mud, slime, and humiliation. I captured 9 kobolds during the rescue. The town guard paid me. The rescued players thanked me through clenched teeth because my level was still lower than theirs. Grant said nothing. The next day, I took the kobolds back to the watchtower and gave them the hill behind it. They sniffed the dirt, scratched the stone, then started digging with a hunger that made the goblins jealous. Kobolds were not just miners, they were vein finders. They could smell copper, they could taste iron and mud. One of them licked a rock and led me to a buried seam the town mine had missed for years. Within 3 days, I had ore. Within 4 days, I had goblin-made carts that looked like they had been designed by angry raccoons, but somehow rolled downhill perfectly. Within 5 days, I walked into town and sold enough copper to buy real tools. The shopkeeper who had laughed at my slimes looked at the coins on his counter and suddenly became very respectful. Respect was funny that way. Arrived late, smelled like money, and pretended it had always been there. Nara noticed me before the others did. She was a blacksmith with short brown hair, heavy gloves, and the calm eyes of someone who had burned herself too many times to fear fire anymore. Most players ignored her because she was not an adventurer. I liked her immediately because she looked at my monsters and did not laugh. She looked at the goblin cart first. That wheel should not work, she said. It doesn't know that, I said. She picked up a copper nugget, bit it, then looked at the kobolds behind me. You found this yourself. They did. She stared at the kobolds. The kobolds stared back and tried to steal a nail. Nora slapped the counter without even looking. The kobold dropped the nail. I decided she was dangerous. You bring me ore, Nora said, and I'll make tools strong enough that your little thieves stop breaking handles every hour. They prefer the term engineers, I said. The goblin behind me nodded proudly, then accidentally hit itself with a hammer. Nora became the first human who helped me without asking when I planned to start playing normally. With better tools, everything changed. Kobolds dug faster, goblins built stronger, slimes processed waste into fertilizer that made the hill grass grow thick and bright, wolves mapped the forest paths by scent, the watchtower grew legs, then arms, then teeth. Not literally at first. Then the goblins suggested adding a wooden wolf head over the gate that could drop rocks from its mouth. So maybe a little literally. Players began calling my base Monster Dump. Then Slime Farm. Then Goblin Hill. Names were weapons when people mocked you, so I stole the weapon and sharpened it. I carved a sign above the gate. Welcome to Monster City. Everyone laughed at the name, but they remembered it. The next problem was food. Monsters worked hard, but they also ate like disaster had teeth. Slimes ate rot, so they were easy. Goblins ate almost anything as long as it looked stolen. Wolves needed meat. Kobolds chewed roots, mushrooms, and sometimes rocks, which I pretended not to see. At first, I hunted scraps from player kills. Then I realized the meadow was being emptied too fast. Players killed every monster that spawned near town, which meant fewer beasts, fewer bones, and less waste. Everyone thought they were farming efficiently. They were cutting down the tree they wanted fruit from. So I created a monster preserve. Not because I was gentle, because I was greedy in a smarter way. I fenced off a section of forest full of low-level slimes, rabbits, and thorn rats. I set goblin traps at the edges, not to kill, but to turn away players. The wolves chased aggressive beasts out and guided harmless ones in. Slimes cleaned disease from the water. Kobolds dug burrows for small creatures. Within a week, the preserve had more monsters than the whole beginner meadow. Players hated it. They called it hoarding. I called it farming without stupidity. Grant called it illegal, but there were no town rules against not killing everything you saw. He tried to prove a point by bringing 12 players to raid the preserve. My wolves spotted them before they crossed the creek. I had 1 hour to prepare. That was plenty. Goblins dug shallow pits and covered them with grass. The slime spread harmless slippery gel across the stones. The kobolds opened tiny tunnels under the trail, just wide enough for ankles to drop through. I stood at the center with my worst cloak, a sad little dagger, and the face of a man who had no plan at all. Grant loved that face. He walked in front of his group, sword on his shoulder, smiling like the world had been built to make him look good. "Move aside, Ethan," he said. "You don't own the forest." "You're right," I said. "The forest owns the forest." He stared at me. "That was the dumbest thing you've ever said." "Wait a second." He took one more step. The trail swallowed his boot. The player behind him slipped on slime gel and crashed into his back. A third tried to dodge, stepped into a grass pit, and vanished up to his waist. The wolves howled from both sides. Goblins popped out of bushes and threw bags of sticky burrs. Nobody was dying. That was important. If I killed them, their friends would call it an attack. If the forest embarrassed them, it was just nature with a sense of humor. Grant ripped his boot free and charged at me. I ran. Not far. Just far enough that he followed me onto the bridge the goblins had built that morning. It looked weak because it was supposed to look weak. Grant laughed and swung his sword. I ducked. His sword cut the rope I had painted to look important. Nothing happened. His smile came back. Then the real rope, hidden under the mud, tightened around his ankle and launched him sideways into a hanging net full of slimes. The net swung over the creek. Grant dangled there upside down, dripping slime gel while his party tried not to laugh and failed. I walked under him and looked up. You were right, the bridge was dumb. That was the day Monster City stopped being only a joke. People still mocked me, but now they did it from outside trap range. The second month began with rain. Not normal rain, black rain. It fell from a purple cloud over the western marsh and turned grass into sludge. Low-level players who walked under it got rashes, fever, and a curse that made their potions taste like dirt. The town guards closed the western road. Merchants complained. Adventurers argued over whose job it was to fix it. A quest appeared in the square. Cleanse the marsh source. Reward level boost, rare item, town favor. Now everyone cared. Grant formed a large party and announced that he would kill the marsh boss by sunset. Riley arrived with them. Riley was not like Grant. She was quiet, sharp-eyed, and always stood where she could see the exits. She used daggers and a short bow, and she had the annoying talent of smiling like she already knew your secret. I had seen her watching Monster City from the tree line more than once. When Grant's party marched west, Riley stayed behind for half a second and looked at my slimes. "You're going too?" she asked. "Eventually. Not with them. I like surviving." She smiled. That sounds useful. Then she followed Grant. 3 hours later, his party ran back screaming. Half of them were purple. One had mushrooms growing from his shoulder armor. Grant's sword was bent. Riley came last, walking backward while shooting arrows into the fog. Something huge moved behind her in the marsh, but it did not cross the road. The marsh boss was not a single monster. It was a swamp colony. Hundreds of poisonous slimes had fused together around a dead tree and formed a living bog with mouths, vines, and glowing yellow cores. Kill one part and the rest swallowed it. Cut a vine and two grew back. Burn the mud and poison gas exploded. Every normal strategy made it worse. The town panicked because the black rain spread another mile overnight. That was my favorite kind of problem. A problem that punished brute force. I spent the morning watching the marsh from a hill. My captured slimes bounced behind me, excited and terrified at the same time. They could absorb poison, but this place was too much. Sending them in directly would be like sending cups to drink a lake. So I did not send them in directly. I asked Nora for empty barrels, old pipes, broken shields, and every ruined kettle she could spare. She looked at the marsh cloud. You're building something stupid. Something stupid that breathes. That's worse. Usually. Goblins turned the junk into rolling filter carts. The kobolds dug channels from the edge of the marsh into storage pits lined with slime gel. My slime sat inside the pits like living filters, absorbing poison water slowly instead of being flooded all at once. Wolves dragged lines through safe paths. Goblins used long poles to poke unstable mud from far away. I did not fight the marsh. I gave it plumbing. By evening, the poison level at the edge dropped, not enough to win, but enough to enter. Riley appeared beside me without making a sound. A wolf growled. She raised both hands. I'm not here to stab anyone, she said. That's what people say right before stabbing someone. I'm here because Grant is telling everyone you're hiding until the real fighters weaken the boss. Is he saying it loudly? Very. Good, then you'll hate what happens next. Riley looked at the filter pits, the slime carts, the goblin poles, and the wolves marking paths with claw marks. You're not trying to kill it. I'm trying to make it digest itself. Her smile faded just enough to show interest. The swamp colony had many cores, but only one brain. I found it by watching where the vines defended most. Deep in the center, under the dead tree, something pulsed every time the black cloud rumbled. Players had attacked the outside. I attacked its habits. Poison slimes liked poison. They moved toward stronger toxins. So I had my slimes filter poison out of the marsh, concentrated in barrels, and let the goblins launch those barrels with a terrible wooden catapult that screamed every time it fired. The first barrel flew 10 feet and exploded over a goblin. He gave me a thumbs up from inside a purple puddle. The second barrel reached the marsh. The colony moved toward it like a hungry beast. We fired another barrel farther in. Then another. Each time the colony dragged part of itself toward the bait. Its body stretched thin, its vines pulled away from the dead tree. The marsh surface opened in long, wet cracks. That was when the kobolds entered through the tunnels. They had dug under the driest ridge, just below the roots. Their job was not to fight, it was to steal the stones holding the tree upright. Kobolds loved stealing from the ground. The tree tilted. The hidden core rose. Riley fired 3 arrows wrapped in slime gel. The arrows stuck to the core, not to damage it, but to mark it. Grant's party, watching from the safe road, finally understood that something was happening without them. Grant shouted and charged into the marsh with a few players behind him. Perfect. The colony hated movement. It lashed at Grant, exposing the core even more. I ran along the slime-marked path with 2 wolves beside me and every captured slime bouncing behind. The core was the size of a wagon wheel, glowing green and black. It opened a mouth in the mud and screamed poison vapor into my face. My health dropped, my skin burned, my mana shook. I did not attack. I threw my entire body onto the core, wrapped both arms around it, and used capture. The world went silent. The glowing rope shot from my palm, wrapped around the core, sank into the marsh and kept going. It wrapped every poison slime, every vine, every puddle, every rotten root. My mana hit 0. Then it went lower. I felt something crack inside my chest, like the skill was chewing on my own life to finish the job. The core fought me with images: rot, hunger, endless rain, a swamp that wanted to become the whole world. I shoved one thought back at it. Work, not death. Not hunger. Work. Absorb poison, clean water, grow medicine, guard the marsh. The core trembled. Capture successful. The black cloud above us collapsed into clean rain. The marsh stopped screaming. Grant stood knee-deep in mud, sword raised at nothing, while the town watched my slimes merge with the captured colony and turn the poison marsh into a giant living water filter. I did not gain many levels. Capture gave terrible experience. But I gained a marsh. And that was much funnier. The town reward was supposed to go to the party that killed the boss. Since nobody killed it, the town guard looked confused for an entire day. In the end, I received town favor, a water charm, and a rare item called a monster bell. The bell could call captured monsters from a distance. Grant received a rash. Riley visited Monster City the next morning. She stood outside the gate, looking at the goblin warning signs. One sign showed a stick figure stepping into a pit. Another showed a stick figure being eaten by a smiling slime. The third just showed Grant upside down. "I want to join," she said. I looked behind her. "Where's your party?" Busy pretending the marsh was teamwork. "My place is full of monsters." "I noticed. They steal. So do players. They smell weird. So do players. The goblins might put a bucket over your door." Riley looked at the goblins watching from the wall. "I'll put one over theirs first." The goblins whispered to each other, impressed. That was how Riley became the first player to move into Monster City. Not a healer, not a saint, not someone who wanted to fix me. She joined because she understood ambushes, information, and the value of being on the side that everyone underestimated. She trained the wolves to carry messages. She taught the goblins how players checked for traps, which made the traps worse in the best way. She mapped enemy camps and found out which merchants were secretly buying my ore while publicly calling me disgusting. With Riley's scouting and Nora's tools, Monster City grew faster than gossip could keep up. Then the skeletons arrived. The old cemetery north of town had been ignored for weeks because skeletons spawned only at night, dropped cheap bones, and were annoying to fight. Players preferred living monsters because they made satisfying noises when hit. I cared about skeletons for one reason. They did not sleep. The cemetery gate was crooked, the moon was thin, and the air smelled like wet stone. I brought slimes to absorb grave mold, goblins to disarm old iron traps, wolves to sense movement, and Riley because she refused to miss anything stupid enough to become interesting. Skeletons rose from the ground in pieces, a hand first, then a skull, then a rib cage that clicked like a box of spoons. A normal player would smash them and collect bone dust. I watched the first skeleton patrol between two graves. Walk the same route again and again. Turn left, drag sword, stop at broken statue. Turn right, drag sword, stop at gate. Not smart. Consistent. Consistency was useful. I ordered the goblins to build a fake grave with a pressure plate under it. The skeleton stepped on it, dropped into a narrow hole, and kept walking against the wall like it believed persistence could solve stone. I captured it easily. The captured skeleton stood in front of me, empty eye sockets glowing faint blue. "Guard," I said. It raised its rusty sword. For the first time, I felt like a king. A very broke king standing in a graveyard with mud on his pants, but still. We captured 12 skeletons that night. The trick was rhythm. Skeletons moved in patterns. Once I understood the pattern, they were easier than goblins. They did not panic. They did not bargain. They did not try to eat rope. They simply walked into traps because the trap happened to be where their path went. Cemetery had a larger threat deeper inside, a bone knight riding a skeletal horse. It was too strong for me to capture directly. It carried a lance, and every time it charged, the air rang like a bell. Riley wanted to leave. I wanted the horse. Not the knight. The horse. A skeletal horse could pull carts all night, never eat, never tire, and scare people for free. So we did not fight the knight, we annoyed the mount. Goblins threw polished stones to make clicking sounds from different directions. Wolves ran between graves, drawing the horse's attention. Slimes coated the ground with slick gel. The knight tried to charge, but the horse's hooves slipped. The rider stayed upright because of magic, but the horse skidded sideways into a statue and got its skull stuck between two stone arms. The knight kept trying to charge while going nowhere. Riley stared at me. "You're really going to steal the horse from under him?" "Not under him, around him." I crawled behind the statue, touched the horse's spine, and used capture. The knight's glowing eyes snapped down at me. For one terrible second, I thought it would stab straight through the horse and me. Then the horse vanished into captured light and reappeared beside me. The knight dropped 6 feet into the mud. It stood up slowly, looked at me, looked at its missing horse, and raised its lance. I rang the monster bell. Every skeleton I had captured turned and saluted the knight. Then, because I had ordered them earlier, they all ran away in different directions. The knight chased its own soldiers through the cemetery until sunrise erased it. Riley laughed so hard she had to sit on a tombstone. By the end of the week, skeletons guarded Monster City's walls at night. They stood in silent rows with spears Nora had made from scrap iron. Players who used to sneak close for fun stopped doing that after a skeleton leaned over the wall and stared at them for 6 straight minutes without blinking. Because it had no eyelids. The city's night raids ended. The ore carts ran after dark. The goblins slept better. The wolves stopped pacing. And I learned my fourth rule. A weak monster at the right job is stronger than a powerful monster doing the wrong one. The next wave of trouble came from success. Monster City had ore, clean water, poison medicine, safe roads, and cheap repairs. Players began using my roads even while mocking the monsters that maintained them. Merchants asked for guard escorts through the forest. Low-level players paid to train in goblin trap courses because it was safer than dying in real dungeons. I built all of it with monsters everyone had thrown away. That made people uncomfortable. It was easier to laugh at a failure than admit a fool might be ahead. Caleb arrived at the town square with 50 players, polished gear, and a smile that felt colder than winter rain. He led one of the strongest guilds in the region. He did not shout like Grant. He did not need to. People listened because his equipment glittered with rare enchantments, and his followers moved like they had practiced looking intimidating in a mirror. Grant stood beside him, trying very hard to look like an equal. He did not. Caleb looked at Monster City's trade carts, the slime-cleaned water barrels, and the goblin-built road signs. Then he looked at me. I hear you control the monster supply around town, he said. I control my city. It's a fort made of mud. Then you shouldn't be worried. His smile stayed, his eyes did not. Caleb wanted 3 things, my mine, my marsh, and my preserve. He did not say that directly. People like him rapped threats in calm voices because they liked pretending knives were decorations. He offered protection. I asked from whom. He smiled wider. That answered the question. I refused. 3 days later, players stopped coming to Monster City. Not because they hated us, because Caleb's guild controlled the main road and charged anyone carrying goods from my city a punishment price at sword point. Merchants turned around. Low-level players got scared. Nora's shipments were delayed. Food supplies tightened. Grant came to the gate and leaned on his sword. You should have accepted, he said. Caleb doesn't lose. I stood on the wall beside a skeleton guard. Everybody loses. Some people just schedule it late. Grant frowned. You talk big for someone hiding behind goblins. The goblin beside me dropped a bucket. It missed Grant by an inch. I looked at the goblin. The goblin looked at me and shrugged. Temptation was a difficult thing. Caleb expected me to attack the roadblock. He had stronger players, better weapons, and healing potions. If I fought him like a normal guild, I would lose in 20 minutes and become a funny story. So I did something worse. I made his road useless. The kobolds dug a new path under the ridge. The wolves marked safe night routes through the forest. Skeleton horses pulled silent carts while players slept. Slimes cleaned a narrow creek until it became deep enough for floating barrels. Goblins built hidden bridges that could be folded into bushes. Within 2 nights, goods flowed around the roadblock like water around a stone. Caleb tightened the road. I stopped using roads. He guarded the bridge. I used tunnels. He watched the tunnels. I used the creek. He blocked the creek. I had spiders. That part surprised even me. Eastern Forest held web spiders, low-level monsters with weak poison and sticky silk. Players hated them because their webs slowed movement and ruined cloaks. I loved them because silk was rope, cloth, armor padding, trap line, netting, bandage material, and comedy. Capturing spiders was miserable. They climbed, they spat, they dropped from trees exactly when I was trying to look brave. My first attempt ended with me wrapped from neck to ankle, while Riley laughed from a branch and asked if I needed a dramatic rescue. I told her I had everything under control. Then I fell over. The second attempt went better because I stopped chasing the spiders and started offering them architecture. Spiders wanted high anchors and prey paths. The goblins built wooden frames between trees. The slimes cleaned the rotting bark so the silk would stick. The wolves chased thorn rats through the frames. The spiders moved in naturally. Once they had built webs, I weakened them with smoke from dried stink mushrooms, then captured them one by one. By the end, I had 20 spiders and smelled like a burned sock. Nara nearly banned me from her forge. Then I showed her the silk. Her eyes changed. Spider silk armor was light, flexible, and resisted cuts better than leather. Mixed with slime gel and thin copper thread, it became even stronger. Nora worked for 2 days without sleeping, then handed me a gray cloak that could catch an arrow without tearing. Do not let the goblins improve it, she said. I looked at the goblins already holding paint and bone spikes. Too late. The spiders also solved the blockade. They strung silk lines from tree to tree over Caleb's road, not low enough to be noticed, high strong and connected to wooden baskets hidden in branches. At night, wolves carried packages to the baskets. Spiders pulled them across the road silently. Skeletons received them on the other side. Caleb's guild guarded the road with 50 armed players, while my trade goods floated over their heads like lazy ghosts. For a week, he had no idea. Then Grant looked up. That was unlucky. He cut one silk line, found a basket, and finally gave Caleb proof that I was not just sneaking around him. I was making fun of him. Caleb's response was calm, direct, and very expensive. He hired fire mages. The first fireball hit Monster City at midnight. The wall did not burn because it was mud and stone. The web towers did. Silk snapped, spiders scattered, goblins screamed, wolves howled. Skeletons stood on the wall and caught fire without understanding why that was bad. I ran through smoke with the monster bell ringing in my hand, calling workers back, ordering slimes to spread gel, ordering kobolds to close mine vents, ordering goblins to drop the emergency dirt piles. Yes, we had emergency dirt piles. After the marsh, I trusted nothing dry. The fire mages stood outside the north field, protected by Caleb's players. Grant was there too, grinning in the orange light. Finally, Riley said, landing beside me with ash on her face, a normal attack. I hate normal attacks. What's the plan? I looked at the burning web towers, the panicking spiders, and the slimes smothering flames with their bodies. Make it not normal. Fire mages needed line of sight. They also hated wet feet. I had a marsh, a clean creek, and hundreds of slimes full of water. The problem was distance. So I used fear. I ordered the skeletons on the wall to collapse. Every burning skeleton dropped at once, falling into the mud like defeated guards. The fire mages cheered. Caleb's front line advanced, thinking the wall defense had broken. Then the ground under them sank. Kobolds had dug water pockets all week in case of siege. Slimes had lined the pockets to keep them from draining. When the players stepped into the kill zone, goblins pulled the plugs. Not a flood. A swamp. The field turned knee-deep and slippery in seconds. Fire mages stumbled. Heavy players sank. Wolves ran along hidden plank paths and harassed the edges. Riley shot arrows at spellbooks, not bodies. Goblins launched slime jars with the repaired catapult, coating mages in wet gel. Caleb did not panic. That was what made him dangerous. He ordered his players to retreat in rows, shield the mages, and burn the mud from a distance. Good plan. Too slow. Because the skeletons stood back up. Their burning bones had gone out in the wet mud. Now they rose behind the retreating players, silent and steaming. They did not do much damage, but they scared people into stepping exactly where the goblins wanted. One by one, Caleb's formation broke. Grant tried to rally them by charging the gate. I respected that. It was stupid, but at least it was honest. He reached the gate, raised his sword, and kicked it open. The gate was fake. Behind it was a second wall, a slime pit, and a sign that said, "Please try again." Grant fell in. I had not approved the sign. The goblins had. I dawned. Caleb retreated with half his players stuck, slimed, webbed, or emotionally wounded. I did not kill them. I let them crawl away dirty and alive, because stories spread better when the storyteller is humiliated instead of dead. That win made Monster City famous. Not beloved. Famous. Those are different things. Low-level players came because they wanted protection. Merchants came because they wanted profit. Outcasts came because no normal guild wanted them. Some wanted to worship me, which was weird. Some wanted to steal my secrets, which was normal. Some just wanted to see the goblin trap that had caught Grant. I charged admission for that. Nora said I was becoming shameless. I told her shame had terrible resale value. But fame also brought hunger, pressure, and bigger predators. Monster City was no longer a joke on a hill. It was a resource center with walls. And resource centers attract kings, guilds, monsters, and idiots with flags. The first flag belonged to a coalition of player parties who called themselves Defenders of Human Progress. Their speech was long, loud, and mostly about how monsters should not live inside walls. They claimed my city was dangerous. They claimed I was building an army. They claimed slimes should not operate public baths. That last point hurt because the slime baths were extremely clean. I let them march toward the south gate. Then I opened it. No trap. No ambush. Just an open gate and a clean road leading to the central square. That confused them. Riley stood beside me on the wall. You're letting them in. Half of them came because they heard we were dangerous. If we hide, we prove them right. If we welcome them, they have to decide whether to attack people buying soup. Goblins sell soup now. They're not good at it, but the bowls are exciting. The coalition entered slowly, weapons out. Inside, they saw slimes cleaning streets, kobolds hauling ore, spiders weaving awnings, skeletons directing night carts into shade, wolves sleeping beside children from the outer farms, and goblins arguing over a soup pot that was somehow smoking blue. It is hard to declare a heroic war while a tiny goblin offers you a bowl and overcharges you by 2 copper. The coalition leader started a speech anyway. I let him talk. Then one of his own players slipped away to buy spider silk gloves. Another asked if the slime baths removed poison rash. A third challenged the goblin trap course and got thrown into a haystack so hard his boots flew off. By sunset, half the coalition was spending money. The other half looked confused and betrayed. I did not defeat their ideology with a counter-argument. I defeated it with convenience. People could hate monsters from far away. Up close, a monster who fixed your broken sword cart for cheap became harder to hate. That was the 5th rule. A city is not built only by walls. It is built by making people need what you protect. Caleb understood that too, which was why he changed tactics. He stopped attacking me and started attacking trust. Poison appeared in a merchant's water barrel. A bridge collapsed near the forest road. A player got bitten by a wild wolf and claimed it was mine. People whispered that captured monsters were turning, that I had lost control, that Monster City would become a dungeon, that the safest thing would be to burn it now. The attacks were small, clean, and hard to trace. Too clean for goblins. Too careful for Grant. Caleb was cutting the ropes that held the city together, one rumor at a time. I could not punch a rumor. I tried once. It was unsatisfying. So I built a truth trap. First, I announced that Monster City would host a festival. This was a terrible idea, which made everyone believe I was desperate. We opened the gates, served food, demonstrated spider silk armor, offered slime baths, and let players bet on goblin trap races. Nora complained that festivals were just markets wearing stupid hats. Riley said that made them useful. While everyone watched the noise, the wolves watched the watchers. Every monster in the city had a job during the festival, but some had fake jobs. A slime pretended to clean the fountain while actually tasting every drop of water. Spiders spun nearly invisible lines across rooftops to catch anyone moving where guests should not. Kobolds hid under floorboards and listened for digging. Skeletons stood in shadows where people forgot they were not statues. I made myself look careless. I walked around smiling, eating fried mushrooms, and letting people see that I had only 2 goblins near me. Caleb's spies saw weakness. They acted at dusk. 3 cloaked players slipped into the mine storehouse and planted powder charges near the supports. Another poured poison into the festival stew. A 5th cut spider lines near the west watch. They were efficient. They were also surrounded by monsters designed to notice exactly those things. The slime in the stew pot turned purple and spat the poison back into the bottle. The kobolds under the mine floor heard the powder sacks drop and quietly replaced them with flour. The spiders let the west watch line get cut, then used the cut silk to mark the saboteur's sleeve with glowing slime dust. I waited until Caleb arrived in the square as a guest, smiling like he had come to offer peace. Then I rang the monster bell. Every captured creature stopped moving at once. Slimes froze in the streets, goblins froze on rooftops, wolves sat, skeletons raised their spears, spiders lowered glowing silk lines around the square, forming a web above everyone's head. The crowd went silent. I walked to the stew pot, lifted the poison bottle, and tossed it to Riley. She caught it and shot the cork off with an arrow, letting the smell spread. The guests backed away. Then the kobolds dragged the flour sacks from the mine and dumped them at Caleb's feet. White powder burst across his polished boots. He looked down, then up at me. For the first time, his smile vanished. I did not accuse him with a speech. Speeches give clever people room to argue. Instead, I let the monsters bring proof piece by piece. The marked saboteur, the bottle, the replaced charges, the cut silk. The wolves tracked each saboteur's path back to the same camp outside the city. The crowd did the rest. Caleb retreated that night without fighting. He had not lost his strength. He had lost the story. Grant stayed behind long enough to glare at me across the square. "You think you're better than players now," he said. I looked at the goblins cleaning flour from the street, the slimes purifying the stew, the skeletons returning to their posts, and the spiders repairing the web. "No," I said, "I think players are monsters with worse teamwork." Grant did not have a reply. That made the goblins cheer. The city entered its golden month after that. He expanded the wall into a ring of packed earth, stone, and living slime sealant. Kobolds found iron deeper in the hill. Nora forged tools, weapons, and armor from ore no one else could reach. Spiders built canopy roads between towers. Wolves formed scout packs that could cross the forest faster than any rider. Skeletons guarded at night and trained by repeating drills without boredom. The goblins invented a lift powered by a skeletal horse walking in a circle. Then they invented a second lift powered by two skeletal horses walking in opposite circles. Then they invented a third lift that launched a cabbage through Nora's roof. That one was banned. Monster City stopped looking like a fort and started looking like a ridiculous dream. Walls curved around tree roots instead of cutting them. Slime canals glowed blue at night. Spider silk bridges swayed above the streets. Kobold tunnels opened into warm underground workshops. Goblin towers leaned at impossible angles and somehow refused to fall. The town that had mocked me began depending on us. When poison rats infested their grain storage, slimes solved it. When bandits attacked the trade road, wolves found them. When a bridge washed out, goblins rebuilt it in half a day and added 3 traps nobody asked for. When the cemetery overflowed with undead during a red moon, my skeleton guards marched out and fought their own kind with calm professionalism. That was the night I gained my first real level surge. Red moon made wild undead rise stronger than usual. The town guard could not hold the north road. Players rushed in for experience, but the undead kept reforming from broken bones. Smashing them did not matter unless the grave energy was sealed. I knew skeleton behavior now. They followed commands, patterns, and anchors. So I captured the anchors. Not the undead. The anchors were old grave bells buried beneath the cemetery. Every time the red moon pulsed, the bells rang without sound and pulled bones together. Players never noticed because they were too busy hitting skulls. I sent kobolds underground to find the vibrations. Slimes coated the tunnels to block grave mold. Spiders lowered silk lines into the crypts. My skeletons stood in perfect formation above, drawing the wild undead into predictable lanes. Grant was there too, fighting hard, covered in dust, refusing to retreat. For all his arrogance, he had courage. He cut down undead until his sword cracked. Then the red moon pulsed, and the bones rose again around him. I could have left him. The thought flashed through me faster than guilt. Then I ordered a wolf pack to drag him out by his cloak. He cursed the whole way. The kobolds found the first bell under a cracked mausoleum. I touched it and used capture. The bell fought like cold water pouring into my skull. It was not alive in the normal way. It was a tool infected by death magic. My skill strained, but the monster bell at my belt rang in answer, and the grave bell snapped into my control. The wild undead in that section froze. Then they saluted me. Grant stared from the mud. I captured 5 more bells before dawn. Each one pulled more undead under my command, but I did not keep all of them. Too many skeletons would scare visitors, and too many guards without work became clutter. So I used them immediately. I ordered the captured undead to rebuild the cemetery walls, repair broken graves, and bury the scattered bones properly. By sunrise, the red moon faded over the cleanest cemetery the town had ever seen. The town guard offered me a medal. I asked for the grave bells instead. Grant limped past me, still covered in slime from the rescue. You could have let me die, he said. Yes. Why didn't you? You still owe admission for the trap exhibit. He looked at me like he wanted to be angry, then looked away. It was not forgiveness. It was worse. Confusion. Confused enemies make mistakes. But I was making mistakes too. Monster City grew fast, and fast growth hides cracks. Food stores dropped. Some goblins fought over tools. Wolves became restless because patrol routes were too easy. Kobolds dug too deep and woke something that breathed hot air through stone cracks. Spiders refused to weave in the lower tunnels because the vibrations felt wrong. The mountain under our hill was not empty. It was sleeping. Nora showed me the first black ore shard with a face like she had found a tooth in her soup. This isn't iron, she said. What is it? Something that was near fire too long. The kobolds called it dragonstone. Not because a dragon owned it. Because a dragon had melted the mountain centuries ago, and its heat still lived in the rock. Deep under Monster City was a furnace vein. It could power forges, heat homes, and melt high-grade metal. It could also explode if mined wrong and turn my ridiculous city into a crater with spider silk decorations. Players heard rumors of dragonstone within 2 days. Of course they did. Rare materials attract brave people, greedy people, and people who think those are the same thing. Caleb returned with a new plan. He did not bring a siege army. He brought miners, not to my gate, to the far side of the mountain. He would dig into the vein from outside my territory and drain the dragonstone before I could use it. If he struck the wrong pocket, the explosion would still break my tunnels. That was the worst kind of attack, one that made defending myself look selfish. If I stopped him, I was hoarding rare ore. If I ignored him, he might kill everyone. So I did neither. I helped him, publicly. That made Nora stare at me like I had eaten a hammer. "You want to help Caleb mine the thing under our city?" she asked. "I want him to think I'm helping." That sentence has caused most disasters in history. "Then we'll make a new category." I sent Caleb a message offering safe mining guidance through Riley. He accepted because refusing would make him look reckless. We met at the far mountain camp with players watching from both sides. He looked elegant. I had mud on one sleeve and a goblin bite mark on my glove. Caleb smiled. "I'm glad you understand cooperation." "I understand explosions." "That too." I gave his miners maps. Real maps. That was important. Lies are fragile. Truth with missing angles is stronger. Maps showed safe routes into low-grade dragonstone pockets. They did not show the kobold listening tunnels above them. They did not show the slime gel vents that could cool overheated stone. They did not show the spider silk alarms. They definitely did not show the central furnace chamber beneath Monster City. Caleb's miners dug where I suggested. They found ore. Everyone applauded. Caleb looked pleased. Then the mountain started humming. He had followed the map, but he had used too many fire lamps, too many metal drills, and too much force. The dragonstone pocket heated fast. Panic spread through the camp. His players backed away. The miners shouted that the vein would blow. Caleb looked at me, and for once there was no mask. Only fear. I rang the monster bell. From the mountain above his camp, kobold tunnels opened like dozens of tiny mouths. Slimes poured down through carved channels and spread across the hot stone, hissing steam. Spiders dropped cooling silk mats over the cracks. Goblins hammered release pins that opened side vents, sending heat into empty chambers we had prepared under the ridge. The explosion did not vanish. It moved. Pressure rushed through the mountain, down the vents, into the empty chambers, and out through a stone chimney the kobolds had carved behind Monster City. A pillar of fire shot into the sky like a dragon waking up angry. The crowd fell silent. Then the fire faded, and the mountain did not collapse. I walked past Caleb and placed my hand on the exposed dragonstone wall. Capture, not on the ores, on the heat spirit living inside it. Every rare resource had a behavior. Dragonstone breathed heat in cycles. It reacted to greed, pressure, and flame. I could not capture a mountain, but I could capture the pattern that made the vein unstable. Skill dug into the stone. My mana twisted. The heat spirit roared without sound, a long ancient anger that smelled like ash and metal. It wanted release. It wanted to burn upward. I gave it work. Heat the forge. Warm the city. Breathe through vents. Burn only where told. The mountain trembled. The capture rope sank into the glowing cracks and turned from white to red. Capture successful. A new mark appeared on my palm, shaped like a small flame inside a stone ring. Nora touched the rock later and whispered something I pretended not to hear. The dragonstone vein became the heart of Monster City. With controlled heat, Nora forged spider silk into metal thread armor, shaped black iron that held enchantments, and built steam lifts for the mines. Slimes cooled hot tools. Goblins invented pressure traps that launched sand instead of fire, because I banned fire traps after one incident involving a soup stand. Kobolds expanded the furnace chambers. Skeletons hauled ore through heat that would have exhausted living workers. Our tools improved. Our walls improved. Our confidence became dangerous. That was when the world noticed. The first royal messenger came in a carriage with gold trim, escorted by knights who looked deeply unhappy about the goblin inspection pit outside the gate. He announced that the crown had recognized Monster City as a strategic settlement and invited me to attend the capital as a loyal vassal. That meant they wanted control without admitting they wanted control. I declined politely. The messenger looked shocked. One goblin offered him soup. He looked more shocked. 2 weeks later, a border lord sent soldiers to demand taxes in the name of regional stability. I offered them discounted spider silk socks. They did not appreciate diplomacy. I knew the pattern, first mockery, then greed, then fear wearing nice boots. The soldiers camped outside the southern road and declared that no goods would leave until I submitted. They were not players. They did not respawn near town. I did not want bloodshed. But I could not let them see mercy as weakness. So I showed them what Monster City did to armies without killing them. I let them build a camp. Then I made the camp too comfortable to leave. Slimes cleaned their latrines at night. Spiders repaired their tents with silk. Wolves scared off wild beasts. Goblins secretly replaced their dull tent stakes with better ones made from scrap iron. Skeletons stood far enough away to be creepy, but close enough to stop thieves. For 3 days, the soldiers cursed at us while enjoying the best camp conditions of their lives. On the 4th day, it rained. Every other field turned to mud. Their camp stayed dry because goblins had dug drainage channels. On the 5th day, their cook ran out of clean water. A slime canal delivered purified water in a barrel. On the 6th day, one soldier stepped into the town with a coin and asked if the slime baths were open. By the 7th day, their commander looked at his men, lounging in spider silk repaired tents, and realized he had lost the siege to customer service. He tried to order an attack to restore discipline. The soldiers moved slowly. Not because they were cowards, because nobody wants to burn down the place with the clean baths. I walked into their camp with Riley beside me, wolves behind me, and no weapon drawn. "You can go home," I said. "Tell your lord the roads are safe, trade is open, and anyone attacking the city will have to explain to his own soldiers why they destroyed the best supply point in the region." The commander hated me. His men loved the supply point. Hate lost. That was the day I learned the 6th rule. Sometimes the best trap is making the enemy comfortable inside the outcome you wanted all along. But comfort could not stop Caleb forever. He disappeared for a month. Grant disappeared with him. Whenever dangerous people vanish, they are either dead, ashamed, or preparing something rude. I hoped for the first. I prepared for the third. Riley's wolves found tracks in the far north, heavy wagons, chained beasts, burned trees, and ash circles. Caleb was gathering monsters not to capture them, but to drive them toward my city. Monster Stampede would solve his problem neatly. If I killed them, I became what everyone said I was pretending not to be. If I captured too many too fast, I might overload my skill and lose control. If I let them through, Monster City would be crushed. The stampede arrived under a blood-orange sunset. Hundreds of wild monsters poured from the north ridge. Boars with stone tusks, frenzied wolves, cave trolls, thorn rats in waves like living knives, giant beetles that clicked their shells like drums. Above them flew carrion birds with iron beaks. Behind the stampede, I saw Caleb's signal fires. He was not leading the monsters. He had scared them. That was clever. I hated when enemies were clever. The city shook as the horde approached. Players on the walls panicked. Some wanted to flee, some wanted to charge out for experience. Goblins screamed insults at the horizon. Skeletons formed ranks. Slimes filled defensive trenches. Spiders tied silk nets between towers. Kobolds sealed lower tunnels. Nora handed me a new weapon. It looked like a staff made from black iron, copper rings, and a captured grave bell at the top. "I made it from the things you keep almost dying near," she said. "That's most things. Then it should be strong." The staff amplified the monster bell. When I struck it against the wall, the sound rolled across the valley. Every captured monster in the city heard me at once. Not with ears. With purpose. The stampede was too large to fight head-on, so I split it into jobs. Stone boars charged in straight lines. Goblins opened angled trenches, not to stop them, but to turn them. Boars slammed into the trenches and were redirected sideways into slime pits, where their legs stuck without breaking. Frenzied wolves followed the strongest scent. My wolves carried meat soaked in calming herbs through side paths, leading wild packs into enclosed forest pens. Thorn rats swarmed low. Spiders dropped silk sheets over them like blankets, then slimes rolled across the top, pinning them in sticky silence. Giant beetles followed vibration. Skeleton horses dragged empty carts in circles, luring the beetles into the quarry, where kobolds collapsed the entrance behind them. Carrion birds attacked eyes. I ordered skeletons to stand on the walls holding mirrors polished by slime gel. The birds dove at the reflections, hit silk nets, and dropped into cages. Every wave became a puzzle. Every puzzle became labor. My mana drained with every capture. 1 boar, 3 wolves, 10 thorn rats together, a beetle, 2 birds, another boar, another wave. The glowing rope shot from my hand again and again until my fingers went numb. Grant appeared during the chaos. He came through the north smoke with a broken sword and a bleeding arm, dragging a child from the outer farms by the collar. He threw the child toward our gate and turned back toward the stampede. For a second, I did not understand. Then I saw the trolls behind him. Grant had been with Caleb, but the stampede had stopped caring who started it. The trolls were chasing everything human. Grant planted himself in front of the gate and shouted for me to close it. I could have. Instead, I rang the bell. The gate opened wider. Grant looked furious. Are you insane? Daily. The trolls charged. Trolls were too strong to trap with normal pits and too angry to calm. They regenerated wounds, smashed stone, and ignored fear. But they had one weakness I had learned from watching goblins argue. They hated being laughed at. I ordered every goblin on the wall to point at the trolls and laugh. The sound was awful. Hundreds of high-pitched goblin shrieks rolled over the battlefield. The trolls looked up, forgot the gate, and charged the wall directly. Exactly where the wall was fake. Again, I love fake gates. The trolls smashed through a thin outer layer and fell into a dry quarry lined with spider silk, slime gel, and dragonstone heating vents. Nora opened the vents. Warm air filled the quarry, not enough to burn, but enough to make the slime gel expand into thick foam. The trolls sank chest deep. They thrashed. The goblins laughed harder. I climbed down the side with the staff in both hands. Capturing one troll would have been hard. Capturing 6 angry trolls while exhausted was stupid. So I did not try to dominate them. I captured the quarry. The capture rope spread through the slime foam, the silk anchors, the dragonstone vents, and the trolls stuck inside. I turned the entire trap into a temporary binding circle. The trolls fought the environment, and the environment belonged to me. One by one, their rage drained. Capture successful. 6 trolls bowed their ugly heads, still glaring at the laughing goblins. I ordered them to carry stone blocks. They looked offended. Perfect. By midnight, the stampede broke. Not defeated. Sorted. Some monsters were captured, some were guided into the preserve, some were driven back north, some were given territory away from roads and marked by wolf patrols. The field outside Monster City looked like a disaster, had tried to attack and been hired for construction instead. Grant collapsed near the gate. I stood over him. You helped, I said. He closed one eye. Don't make it weird. I charge extra for weird. He snorted, then passed out. Caleb did not appear that night. Cowards love consequences from a distance. But his signal fires vanished before dawn. The stampede changed everything. The city's workforce doubled. Trolls hauled stone, beetles pulled heavy plows, boars cleared fields, captured birds carried warning charms. The thorn rats, after a lot of trial and painful error, became pest control in the grain stores. Grant stayed in the infirmary for 3 days, complained the whole time, then left without thanking anyone. 2 mornings later, I found a bag of high-grade whetstones outside Nora's forge. No note. Grant was bad at gratitude. That made it easier to accept. Monster City now had the strength to be called a kingdom, but strength creates a crown even before anyone says the word. People started asking me to judge disputes. A merchant accused goblins of stealing his apples. The goblins had stolen his apples, but only after the merchant underpaid for silk. I made them return half the apples and build him a better stall with a hidden drawer for coins. Everyone left confused but satisfied. The player demanded access to the mine because all players deserved equal opportunity. I gave him a pickaxe and sent him with kobolds into a training tunnel filled with singing rock beetles. He lasted 4 minutes and decided equal opportunity was exhausting. A farmer wanted wolves removed from the road. I had the wolves escort his sheep for 3 nights. After that, he asked if he could rent 2. I did not become respected because people liked me. I became respected because problems entered my city sharp and left shaped into tools. Caleb could not allow that. His final move came from the capital. The royal army marched under banners, with Caleb walking beside their commander like a trusted advisor. The army brought siege towers, fire wagons, priests, knights, and monster hunters with silver chains. They claimed I had created an unlawful monster realm and threatened the safety of mankind. I wondered how many times mankind had used that sentence before doing something stupid. The army camped across the valley, 10,000 soldiers, hundreds of players, dozens of hunters trained to kill and bind beasts. Their siege towers were plated with iron. Their fire wagons carried alchemical flame that slime water might not smother. Their priests had magic that could turn undead, weaken monster bonds, and make skeletons crumble. For the first time, Monster City was quiet. Even the goblins whispered. Nora found me on the wall at night, looking at the army lights. You're planning something dangerous, she said. I'm always planning something dangerous. This one is worse. Yes. Riley appeared on the other side because she enjoyed entering conversations like a ghost with opinions. We can evacuate the outer rings, she said. We will, I said. And the inner city. We hold it. Nora crossed her arms. Can we? I looked at the slimes glowing in canals, the goblin towers leaning under moonlight, the spiders weaving silent bridges, the wolves pacing on rooftops, the skeletons standing at the gates. The kobold tunnels breathing warm dragonstone air. Normal City would ask how many soldiers it had. Monster City asked how many problems it could turn into workers before breakfast. We don't beat that army, I said. We teach it the wrong lesson until it defeats itself. The next morning, I sent a single cart to the royal camp. It carried bread, clean water, and a white cloth. No trap. The commander accepted the supplies suspiciously. Caleb told him not to trust me. Good. Suspicion makes people stare at the wrong hand. The second cart arrived with medicine for rash and foot rot. The third cart brought spider silk bandages. The soldiers began to argue. Some said it was a trick. Some said a trick that cured foot rot was still worth opening. By nightfall, the camp had accepted 6 carts. None were trapped, because the carts were not the attack. The wheels were. Each wheel had been treated with scent oil made from wolf glands and calming herbs. As the carts rolled through camp, they laid invisible paths across the ground. Wild insects followed. So did tiny captured slimes hidden under the axle frames. They slipped into drainage ditches, cleaned waste, purified water, and made the camp healthier. Again, not the attack. The attack was dependency. For 3 days, I improved the enemy camp. Their sick recovered, their water cleared, their boots dried, their horses calmed. Caleb grew more furious with every act of kindness. The commander grew more unsure. On the 4th day, I stopped sending carts. The camp immediately noticed. Food tasted worse, water smelled bad, insects returned, horses panicked at night. Soldiers who had called my gifts suspicious now complained that the suspicious gifts were late. Caleb urged an immediate assault. The commander finally agreed. That was when we evacuated the outer rings and opened every visible gate. The army advanced into an empty district. No civilians, no merchants, no easy targets, just clean streets, silent houses, and little signs drawn by goblins that said, "Welcome invaders, please keep hands inside the trap zone." The commander ordered caution. Caleb ordered speed. Speed won because pride is louder than caution. The first siege tower rolled through the south gate and sank. The street was not stone, it was a thin layer over a slime reservoir. The tower tipped slowly, painfully, almost politely, then leaned into a spider silk net stretched between buildings. Soldiers spilled out onto soft slime cushions, alive but useless. The second tower stopped when kobolds collapsed the road in front of it, revealing a trench full of captured beetles waiting to push from below. The beetles lifted the tower like a toy and rotated it until it faced the wrong direction. The third tower reached the inner wall. There was no inner wall. There was an illusion of a wall made from painted silk and shadow. Behind it stood 20 trolls holding clubs. The soldiers screamed and ran backward into a goblin foam trap. The priests began chanting to break monster bonds. That was the moment I feared most. Their magic spread like pale light, touching the skeleton guards first. Bones rattled, blue flames flickered, some skeletons dropped their spears. If the priests broke my control, the undead could collapse or turn wild. I struck the staff against the ground. The grave bell inside it answered. I had captured the cemetery anchors. I had studied the red moon. I knew undead bonds were not built on emotion like wolves or habit like goblins. They were built on rhythm. The priests tried to silence my skeletons. I gave the skeletons music. Every captured skeleton stamped one foot at the same time. Then again. 1,000 bone heels struck stone in one steady beat. The grave bells under the city rang with them. The priests' chants wavered. Riley fired arrows into the ground around them, each arrow tied to spider silk, not to hurt them, to make a web of vibration. The skeleton rhythm traveled through the silk and shook their formation apart. Their magic broke like a song, interrupted by a louder drum. The fire wagons came next. A chemical flame spilled from iron mouths, blue and green and too hot for normal water. It washed over the outer square and turned stone black. Slimes recoiled, spider silk curled. Goblins ran in all directions, which was both panic and their assigned strategy. Fire chases air. So we stole the air. Kobolds opened underground vents. Dragonstone heat pulled smoke downward through side channels. Slimes released stored marsh vapor, thick and damp, not to extinguish the flame but to smother its reach. Spiders dropped mineral dust from rooftops. The blue-green fire sputtered, shrank, and clung to the wagons. Then the goblins did the goblin thing. They turned the fire wagons around. Not by pushing them, that would be brave and stupid. They hooked spider silk lines to the wagon axles, ran the lines through rooftop pulleys, and had trolls pull from behind buildings. The wagons rotated slowly while still spraying flame. The royal army set its own supply carts on fire. I almost felt bad. Almost. Caleb finally entered the battlefield himself. He wore a silver cloak and carried a sword that glowed with anti-monster light. Every captured beast near him flinched. Goblins dropped tools. Wolves snarled and backed away. Even my slimes shrank. So that was his hidden card. A monster killer relic. He walked through the chaos straight toward me. Grant followed him, but slower. His face looked wrong, tense, and uncertain. Caleb raised the sword and the light cut through a spider bridge above us. Silk snapped. A web tower leaned. My control over nearby monsters weakened. I felt it like cold fingers digging under my skin. Your trick ends here, Caleb said. He sounded happy. That was his mistake. People who enjoy ending things forget to watch what begins behind them. I stepped down from the wall into the square. No guards beside me, no wolves, no goblins, just me, the staff, and a street full of slime puddles reflecting firelight. Caleb smiled. You finally decided to fight like a player. No, I said. I decided to let you stand where the city can see you. He charged. He was faster than I expected. The sword flashed, and the anti-monster light carved a line across my staff. Pain shot through my palm. The capture mark flickered. I stumbled back. Caleb pressed forward, each swing cutting not just air but control. Skeletons collapsed behind him. Slime split apart. A wolf howled from a rooftop and fell silent. The army saw him winning and cheered. Grant did not. He looked at the fallen wolf. That tiny hesitation saved me. Caleb raised his sword for the final strike. Grant slammed into him from the side. The blow did not hurt Caleb much, but it shifted his foot. 1 foot. Onto a clean stone tile that had no reason to be clean in a burning city. The tile sank. Not a pit. A stage. The street around us opened in a perfect circle. Spider silk lines tightened. Slime mirrors rose from hidden channels. Polished shields flipped from walls. Suddenly Caleb stood in the center of a ring, reflecting his own sword light from every direction. The anti-monster relic was powerful because it focused hatred outward. So I gave it itself to hate. Light bounced from mirror to mirror, blade to shield, shield to slime, slime to silk, until Caleb's sword screamed with feedback. He tried to lower it. The relic pulled his arm up. It wanted monsters, and the ring showed it monsters everywhere. Images, reflections, echoes. Caleb's calm shattered. What did you do? I gave your sword a crowded room. The relic exploded in white sparks. Caleb dropped to one knee, his cloak smoking. My monsters stirred. The bond returned like breath-filling lungs. I could have captured Caleb. The thought was ugly and brief. Capture was for monsters, and I had learned enough to know that not every monster had claws. But some were still better left uncaptured. The royal commander saw Caleb fall, saw Grant standing between him and me, and saw his army tangled, trapped, wet, confused, and very much alive. That mattered. There were no fields of corpses, no burned soldiers begging for mercy, no monster horde eating prisoners. There was only an army that had entered Monster City and been turned into a helpless audience. I raised the staff. Every monster in the city stopped. The silence hit harder than any roar. I spoke loudly enough for the whole square. Leave your weapons where they are, walk out, eat at the south camp if you're hungry, drink clean water if you're thirsty, tell the capital we are not a dungeon, we are not a rebellion, we are a city. And the next army that comes here will be given jobs. No one laughed. Then a goblin raised a broom like a spear and shouted something rude. That ruined the mood but improved morale. The royal army withdrew before sunset. Not defeated by slaughter. Defeated by embarrassment, logistics, and the terrifying possibility of being assigned to road maintenance by goblins. Caleb was carried out under guard by his own people. Grant stayed behind at the gate, staring at the city he had tried so hard to hate. You planned for my betrayal, he asked. I planned for you to do something stupid. That's not the same thing. It usually is with you. He looked like he wanted to argue, but his mouth twitched. Then he nodded once and walked away. He did not join Monster City. Not yet, but he stopped standing on the wrong side of every wall. After the siege, the capital sent no more armies. Instead, towns sent requests. A village needed its poisoned well cleaned. I sent slimes. A mountain road needed night guards. I sent skeletons. A mining camp needed safe tunnels. I sent kobolds. A forest settlement needed scouts. I sent wolves. A weaving guild wanted spider silk training. The spiders refused to teach anyone who screamed too much, so that took longer. Monster City spread without conquering. Roads became veins, tunnels became roots, watchtowers became eyes. Every place we helped began depending on us, and every dependency became a quiet promise. People started calling me Lord. I hated it. The goblins loved it and made me a crown from bent spoons. I wore it once as a joke. Then someone bowed. So I never wore it again. Nora forged a real crown anyway, but she called it a defensive helmet to avoid annoying me. It had no jewels, only a ring of black iron, copper, and spider silk, with a tiny slime core set in the front to detect poison. Very subtle, Riley said. It's a helmet, I said. It has a crown shape. For defense. Against what? Humility. The goblins voted to add spoon spikes. I vetoed the vote. The final challenge of that season came from the land itself. The old map called the Central Valley unclaimable because 3 great powers bordered it: the capital to the south, Monster Forest to the east, and the Ash Mountains to the north. Whoever tried to hold it got crushed between armies, beasts, and disasters. That was why I wanted it. Not for glory. For position. Monster City had grown from a tower into a network, but networks need a heart. The Central Valley had rivers, roads, ruins, and enough space to build something bigger than defense. A city that only survives attacks is still trapped by fear. I wanted a city that made attacks irrelevant. The valley was occupied by a roaming disaster called the Crownless Giant. No one knew where it came from. It looked like a mountain had learned to walk badly. Its body was packed earth, broken ruins, tree roots, and old weapons stuck in clay. It wandered the valley, crushing anything that built too tall. Players had tried to kill it for months. Armies had tried to drive it away. The capital had declared it a natural hazard and built roads around it. I looked at the reports and smiled. It crushed buildings. It ignored camps. It attacked tall structures. It followed vibrations from construction. Everyone had treated it like a boss monster. I treated it like a bad neighbor with sensitive hearing. We entered the valley with no towers, no walls, and no banners. Just low tents, silent carts, slimes in barrels, spiders on covered frames, kobolds underground, wolves on the ridges, and skeletons lying flat under tarps until night. For 5 days, we built nothing above waist height. The giant wandered past twice and ignored us. And goblins dug foundation lines shaped like a maze. Kobolds placed stone blocks underground. Spiders stretched silk under the grass. Slimes filled channels with gel. Skeletons moved materials only at night, stepping in rhythm opposite the giant's footsteps so the vibrations blended. We were building a city the giant could not hear. Nora called it impossible. Then she helped. Riley mapped the giant's patrols and found that it avoided one ruined hill in the center of the valley. The hill was covered in ancient stone pillars, none taller than a person, all broken. The giant walked around it every time. I went there alone at sunset. The pillars had markings worn almost smooth, not words, patterns, lines like roots, rivers, and chains. When I placed my palm on one, my capture mark warmed. This place had held something before. Not the giant. The valley. I understood then, the crownless giant was not guarding the valley from people. It was the valley's broken repair system, smashing anything that stressed the land. Build high, it crushed you. Dig wrong, it crushed you. March armies, it crushed you. It was not evil. It was maintenance with fists. I almost admired it. Then it tried to step on my camp. Admiration has limits. The plan took 9 days. First we built low, then wide, then underground. We let the giant see small, harmless structures while hiding the true framework beneath the soil. Goblins wanted to add insult signs. I allowed only one, facing away from the giant, because I was learning restraint. Second, we gave the giant problems it could solve. We placed unstable stone piles along its route. It crushed them and packed the road flat. We dug shallow flood channels. It stepped through them and pressed the banks firm. We stacked dead wood where we wanted barriers. It smashed them into perfect mulch. The giant thought it was destroying us. It was landscaping. Third, we made it tired. Not with battle, with chores. Every day the giant crushed, packed, flattened, and cleared exactly what we wanted. Every night, kobolds reinforced the results. Slime sealed cracks, spiders tied roots together, skeletons placed stones. Trolls hauled the heavy pieces into position. By the 10th day, the valley had roads, drainage, foundations, and defensive berms. The giant had built half of it. Then Caleb escaped custody. Of course he did. Some people are too dramatic to stay defeated. He arrived in the valley with the remains of his loyal players and a stolen monster horn designed to enrage beasts. He had lost his guild, his reputation, and his relic. All he had left was the belief that if he could not own my future, he could break it. He climbed the ruined hill at dawn and blew the horn. The sound ripped across the valley. Wolves howled in pain, slimes shivered, spiders scattered, the crownless giant stopped moving. Then it turned toward our hidden city. For the first time, it ran. A mountain of clay and roots thundered across the valley, smashing roads it had helped build, heading straight for the central foundation, where our people and monsters were gathered. Riley reached me first, breathless. That horn is forcing it into attack. Can you reach Caleb? Not before the giant reaches us. Nora looked at the approaching disaster and gripped her hammer. Please tell me this was in your plan. Parts of it. Which parts? The bad parts. I ran to the central foundation, raised the staff, and rang the monster bell. Every captured monster in the valley answered. The giant was too huge to trap in a pit, too old to scare, too strong to bind directly. The horn had turned its maintenance instinct into rage. I could not overpower that. So I gave it a bigger repair. I ordered everyone to break the city. Goblins cut support ropes, trolls knocked over stone stacks, kobolds opened unfinished tunnels, spiders dropped half-made bridges, slimes flooded the foundations, skeletons pulled marker poles from the ground. In seconds, our beautiful hidden city looked like a collapsing mess. Nora stared at me like I had lost my mind completely. The giant slowed. Its horn-forced rage pulled it forward. Its valley instinct saw damage everywhere. It hesitated. That hesitation was the gap. I used the staff to strike the captured pillar pattern beneath the foundation. The ancient marks lit up through the mud, spreading from stone to stone, root to root, channel to channel. The hidden city framework was not just buildings. It was a giant capture circle drawn across the valley using roads, silk, slime canals, tunnels, and stone berms. I had not planned to use it yet. Caleb forced my hand. The crownless giant stepped into the center. I raised my palm. Capture. The glowing rope did not wrap around the giant. It wrapped around the valley. My mana vanished instantly. My knees hit the ground. The staff cracked. The monster bell rang without being touched. Every captured creature in the valley poured a thread of strength into the circle. Slimes pulsed. Goblins gripped ropes. Wolves howled. Skeletons stamped. Kobolds pressed their claws into stone. Spiders tightened silk lines. Trolls held the berms as the earth shook around them. The giant roared. It was not just loud. It was a landslide with anger. Horn screamed from the hill as Caleb blew again and again, trying to force the giant through the circle. Riley sprinted across the broken road toward him, dodging falling stones. Grant appeared from the dust on the ridge, because apparently he had developed a habit of arriving during disasters with terrible timing and useful violence. He tackled Caleb before the third horn blast finished. The sound broke. The giant's rage stumbled. I pushed one command through the capture rope. Repair. Not obey. Not kneel. Repair. The giant froze. Its massive head lowered, mud and roots shifted across its face. For a moment I saw the valley in it, floods, fires, armies, towers, mines, wounds layered over centuries. It was tired. I understood tired. I offered it work with purpose. Guard the valleys. Strengthen the roads. Lift what is too heavy. Crush only what threatens the land. The giant's fist opened. Capture successful. The circle shattered. I collapsed face first into slime. When I woke up, the crownless giant was sitting in the middle of the valley like a mountain, pretending to be a dog. Goblins had already climbed onto its shoulders and were arguing about where to install a lookout platform. Nora was asleep beside an anvil. Riley sat on a stone, cleaning dirt from her dagger. Grant stood near the edge of camp, arms crossed, pretending he had not been waiting for me to wake up. Caleb was tied in spider silk from neck to ankle and looked furious enough to boil rain. I sat up slowly. Everything hurt. The valley city was half broken, half finished, and completely ours. The giant had already repaired the main road by stepping on it carefully, Slimes cleaned the flood channels, kobolds checked the foundations, spiders rewove bridges, skeletons reset the marker stones. Trolls moved blocks under the giant's direction, which mostly involved it pointing with one huge finger and making sounds like grinding hills. The workers understood. I did not. That was fine. A ruler does not need to understand every conversation. Only enough to avoid being crushed by it. The capital surrendered the valley claim without calling it surrender. They called it recognition. They sent gifts, requests, and extremely polite messages. The border towns pledged trade. The merchants built warehouses. Players arrived in crowds, not to mock me this time, but to ask for permits, protection, jobs, and training. I remembered standing in the beginner meadow with one slime on my boot while everyone laughed. Now from the hill above the valley, I watched roads stretch from Monster City like silver lines. Slime canals glittered in the sun. Spider bridges shone between towers. Skeleton patrols marched at dusk. Wolves ran along ridge paths. Kobolds sang in mines under the earth. Goblins built a gate shaped like the giant's face, and somehow it looked both heroic and insulting. The crownless giant stood behind the city, one hand resting on the wall it had helped create. People began calling it the Monster Kingdom. I did not correct them. Not because I wanted a throne. Because names become true when enough people need them. Grant came to me on the day the central gate opened. He did not bow. I would have thrown a slime at him if he had. I'm leaving, he said. Good luck. He frowned. That's it. What did you want, a parade? I thought you'd ask where. I assumed somewhere with trouble. He looked toward the northern horizon. There are cities up there that still think monsters are only for killing. Most cities do. Maybe they need to be shown otherwise. That was the closest Grant had ever come to admitting I was right. I decided not to ruin it by smiling too much. Try not to get eaten while becoming wise, I said. He walked away, then stopped. Ethan. I looked over. The next time someone comes for this place, don't expect me to save you again. You saved me once by accident. Still counts. No, it doesn't. He left angry. So everything was back to normal. Riley watched him go from the wall. He'll be back, she said. Probably with a problem. You like problems. I like problems that arrive labeled. Nora joined us carrying the repaired staff. The crack down its side had been sealed with black iron and spider silk. The grave bell at the top had a new ring of dragonstone around it. It may explode, she said. You always say that. I am often correct. I took the staff. It hummed in my hand, stronger than before, but also heavier, not in weight, in meaning. The central gate was supposed to open at noon. It opened at sunset instead, because apparently the world saw me holding a repaired cursed staff and decided that was a personal invitation to act stupid. The first problem came from the sky. A flock of silver carrion birds appeared over the valley, shining like coins with wings. They circled once, twice, then dropped bundles wrapped in red cloth all over the outer farms. The bundles hit the ground, split open, and released clouds of sweet purple mist. Every human nearby ran away coughing. Every monster nearby went completely insane. Slime grew teeth and tried to eat a fence. A goblin began hammering nails into the ground because he said the earth looked suspicious. 3 wolves started chasing their own shadows. A skeleton climbed into a cart and declared itself a boat. The giant looked down at its own hands like it had forgotten how many fingers were polite. Nora covered her nose and glared at the falling birds. That is frenzy pollen, she said. Someone wants our own workers to tear the city apart before the gate opens. Riley pulled her bow off her shoulder. Shoot the birds. If you shoot them above the city, they drop more bundles. So don't shoot the birds. Correct. I watched the flock. They were too high for traps, too fast for wolves, and too shiny for goblins to ignore. Half my goblin crew had already stopped building and started pointing at the sky like the gods were throwing jewelry. A normal ruler would protect the farms. A smart ruler would protect the city. I protected the problem. I rang the monster bell once, not loud enough to command, just loud enough to annoy every captured creature inside my range. Then I shouted for every slime to stop cleaning and start eating anything purple. That sounded insane, which meant the goblins immediately loved it. Slimes rolled into the mist like living soap bubbles. Frenzy pollen worked by sticking to skin and mana channels, but slimes did not have normal skin, and their mana channels were basically soup with ambition. The moment they absorbed the pollen, they started glowing purple and wobbling like drunk jelly. Then they began sneezing. Every sneeze launched tiny clouds of harmless glitter. The farmers stared. Riley stared. Nora stared hardest. Did you just turn chemical warfare into festival decorations? She asked. I prefer the word atmosphere. That word is why people distrust you. The first wave of mist vanished under the slimes, but the birds were still dropping more bundles, and now they were diving lower, screeching as if something on the ground was calling them. That was the mistake I was waiting for. I sent the goblins a signal. Not a flag, not a horn, a sandwich. A pulley snapped loose on the west tower, and a giant fake sandwich made of hay, boiled monster fat, and shiny tin plates rose above the wall. He had built it weeks ago because goblins insisted every proper fortress needed emergency lunch bait. I had called it stupid, then secretly approved it because stupid ideas are just clever ideas wearing a fake nose. The silver birds saw the glittering fake meal and dove. At the last second, spiders hidden under the tower fired nets straight upward, not web sheets, but woven cylinders lined with sticky slime gel and tiny bone hooks. The first dozen birds slammed into them and got rolled into screaming silver burritos. The rest scattered. The wolves were waiting. My scout wolves had been trained to chase direction, not prey. They sprinted along the ridge paths in a pattern that made the frightened birds turn away from the farms and toward the empty quarry. In the quarry, kobolds had stacked reflective ore in rings. Silver carrion birds loved shiny things. They flew in. The ore rings flashed. The birds landed. The skeletons raised shields over the exit, like a lid closing over a pot. I walked into the quarry while the birds shrieked and pecked at the shields. They were low-level annoyances to high-level players, barely worth killing unless someone needed feathers, but I did not see feathers. I saw flying couriers. I saw crop scouts. I saw sky alarms. I saw 1,000 tiny chances to be irritating from above. So I rang the bell. Birds fought hard for exactly 6 seconds. Then the capture light snapped around them, turning the entire quarry into a glittering storm of angry coins. When the light faded, I owned 213 silver carrion birds and one very embarrassed goblin who had been caught inside the fake sandwich because he wanted to see how it worked from the perspective of lunch. The city cheered. Then the second problem arrived from underground. The first sign was the sound. Not a roar, not an explosion, a chewing noise. Every kobold in the mines came sprinting out at once, which was impressive because kobolds never willingly abandoned ore unless the ore started flirting with them. One of them grabbed my sleeve and made frantic digging motions. Something is eating the iron roots, Riley translated from panic and dust. Nora's face went pale. Iron roots hold the lower wall. If they break, half the foundation sinks. I looked at the repaired staff in my hand. How long? Nora listened to the ground. A crack ran through the stone beneath my boot. That long. The earth split open near the south wall, and a creature burst out like a living battering ram made of dirt, scales, and terrible dental choices. It looked like a mole had married a crocodile and raised their child inside a blacksmith shop. Its mouth was round, filled with rotating teeth, and each tooth sparked as it scraped the stone. Then a second one burst up beside it. Then a third. Iron-jaw burrowers. Players hated them because they gave bad experience and ruined equipment. Armies hated them because they ate foundations. Miners hated them because they never apologized. I loved them immediately. The problem was that they were chewing through my city. The bigger problem was that they were not wild. Each burrower had a red thorn stabbed behind its neck, pulsing with the same purple glow as the frenzy pollen. Someone had sent birds from above and burrowers from below, trying to make Monster City collapse in front of every guest. That was almost admirable. Almost. The south wall groaned. A tower tilted. People screamed and ran. Goblins shouted suggestions that were mostly explosions. Skeletons braced the sinking stones with their own bodies. Slimes poured into cracks, trying to hold the ground together like sticky glue. I needed the burrowers alive. I also needed them to stop eating my home. So I gave them something better to eat. Kobolds, I shouted, bring the fake gold. Riley blinked. The what? The fake gold. We have fake gold. We have goblins, of course we have fake gold. The kobolds rolled out carts filled with yellow-painted slag, broken bronze, and cheap shiny ore. To humans, it looked worthless. To iron-jaw burrowers, it smelled like dessert because the paint was mixed with powdered magnet moss. I had planned to use the carts in case merchants tried to cheat us. It turned out they were also perfect for bribing underground chainsaws. We dumped the fake gold into the open quarry pit and beat shields like dinner bells. The burrowers turned. Their round mouths spun faster. They abandoned the wall and dove toward the carts. Now came the stupid part. I jumped onto the back of the biggest burrower. Riley shouted something that was definitely not praise. Nora shouted something that sounded like a medical prediction. Burrower bucked, rolled, and tried to dive. I jammed the monster bell staff between two scales and hooked myself in with spider silk wrapped around my waist. The ground vanished as the creature plunged underground. For one horrible second, everything became darkness, heat, and teeth noise. My face hit mud. My boot hit stone. Something scraped my ear and took 3 years off my life. But the staff rang. Not above ground. Not in open air. Inside the tunnel. Sound traveled through the dirt like thunder trapped in a bottle. The burrowers froze. Their red thorns pulsed harder, trying to force them forward, but the bell wrapped around their instincts and squeezed. Capture light exploded underground. I could not see it, but I felt it. Every tunnel flashed white. Every tooth stopped spinning. Every burrower shuddered as my power grabbed them by the soul and stamped my ownership over the command burning in their necks. Then the biggest burrower accepted capture and immediately forgot it was holding up a tunnel. The roof collapsed. I was buried alive for exactly 12 seconds. It was the longest 12 seconds of my life, except for the time a slime tried to learn hugging. Then the new burrower crew dug me out from below, cheerful as puppies and covered in stone dust. I emerged from the ground in front of the south wall, hair full of dirt, one shoe missing, holding the red thorn like a trophy. The crowd went silent. I spat mud. Good news, I said. We have tunnel builders now. The crowd exploded. Nora walked over and slapped the back of my head. That is for being reckless. Then she slapped the red thorn out of my hand with a tool. That is because it is cursed. Fair. Burrowers got to work immediately, not because they understood loyalty yet, but because I pointed them at collapsed ground, and they seemed delighted to have a legal reason to chew. Within minutes, they carved support tunnels under the wall, packed the cracks with stone, and opened new drainage routes that would have taken kobolds 3 months. South wall rose back into place inch by inch, lifted by burrowers from below, braced by skeletons, sealed by slimes, and decorated by goblins who painted angry faces on the repair stones to scare future earthquakes. That should have been enough disaster for one ceremony. But whoever attacked us had committed to being annoying. The third problem came through the front road, wearing white cloaks and carrying baskets. A group of traveling cooks entered with the guests. They smiled, bowed, and offered free victory pies to the crowd. Nothing makes people trust you faster than dessert, which is why I trust dessert less than assassins. The pies smelled amazing. That was the first warning. Nobody who travels through monster territory with perfect pies is innocent. The second warning was that the slimes refused to go near them. My slimes would clean poison, acid, rot, spider drool, troll armpits, and whatever goblins called soup. But the moment those pies appeared, every slime backed away like the crust had insulted their family. I raised one hand. The skeleton guards crossed their spears. The cooks froze. The crowd groaned because apparently saving them from murder was less important than snacks. I walked up to the nearest basket and lifted the lid. Inside was a pie crust shaped like a smiling face. The face blinked. Then the pie opened its mouth and screamed. All the pies screamed back. Mimic pies. Of course. Hundreds of tiny dessert monsters sprang from the baskets with jam tongues, crust teeth, and murderous cherries for eyes. They leapt at the crowd, snapping at fingers and noses. One landed on a noble's face and began chewing his mustache with personal hatred. The white-cloaked cooks dropped smoke pellets and tried to run. They made it 3 steps before a wolf tripped one, a skeleton folded another into a wheelbarrow, and a goblin hit the third with a frying pan, so hard the pan became a religious symbol for about an hour. I did not chase them. I was staring at the mimic pies. Tiny monsters that could disguise themselves as food. Tiny monsters that could hide in containers. Tiny monsters that could bite intruders in the hand the moment they reached for supplies. My warehouse security problem had solved itself with teeth. "Do not kill the pastries," I shouted. Everyone looked at me like I had finally become too strange to follow. "Ethan," Riley said while kicking a pie off her boot, "they are eating people." "Only a little." A pie jumped at my face. I caught it with both hands. It snapped at my nose, spraying berry filling. I stared into its furious cherry eyes. "You want to bite things," I said. "I have so many better things for you to bite." The monster bell rang. Mimic pies resisted longer than the birds. They were stubborn, vicious, and full of jam, but they were weak, and my capture power had grown stronger with every monster under my command. One by one, the pies stopped screaming and began trembling in my hands. When the capture light faded, the courtyard was covered in loyal pastries. The noble with the half-chewed mustache pointed at me. "Are you going to compensate me?" A mimic pie hissed at him. He lowered his hand. "No, that is fine." I assigned the mimic pies to guard food stores, treasure rooms, and suspiciously comfortable chairs in guest halls. The goblins begged for one to guard their tool shed. I allowed it. The pie bit 6 thieves and 1 goblin who forgot the password, which was also pie. By now, the guests had started to realize something important. Every attack against me was becoming inventory. That changed the mood. When the birds came, people panicked. When the burrowers came, people screamed. When the mimic pies came, people backed away, yes, but they also watched me like gamblers watching dice. They wanted to see what I would turn the disaster into. That was dangerous. Not because of them. Because I enjoyed it. Then the real enemy finally stopped hiding. A horn sounded from the eastern road, sharp and proud. The crowd parted as soldiers in red scale armor marched toward the unfinished central gate. Their shields were polished, their boots were clean. Their leader rode a black horse with feathers braided into its mane, which told me he either wanted to look impressive or had lost a bet to a bird. Behind the soldiers rolled cages, covered in iron cloth. The leader raised his hand, and the army stopped in perfect formation. He looked at my walls, my monsters, my mud-covered clothes, and my staff. Then he laughed. It was not the loud laugh of someone having fun. It was the careful laugh of a man performing confidence for people behind him. "No wonder the capital fears this place," he said. "It is a garbage heap with banners." I looked at the red thorns recovered from the birds, burrowers, and pies. "Let me guess," I said, "you sent the appetizers." His smile twitched. "That was yes." Riley stepped to my side. Nora stepped to the other. Skeletons lined the wall. Wolves gathered on the ridge. Goblins slowly hid explosives behind their backs with the grace of guilty children. The Red Commander gestured to the covered cages. "You built a town by taming weak pests. I brought something that cannot be tamed." That sentence had ruined many men before him. The soldiers pulled the iron cloth away. Inside the cages were mirror mantises. 6 of them. Tall, razor-limbed insects with bodies like polished glass and faces that reflected whoever stood before them. They were infamous for one ability. When threatened, they copied the strongest attack used against them and threw it back twice as sharp. Players hated them because every raid turned into a competition to see who could accidentally kill the party. The Red Commander drew his sword. "These monsters learn from violence," he said, "so let us see what your little kingdom teaches them." He slashed the cage locks. The mantises unfolded. The crowd fled. The soldiers backed away. The mirror mantises looked at my wall, my monsters, and me. Their faces reflected the monster bell. Nora whispered, "Do not ring it." I knew why. If they copied the bell, even imperfectly, they might send a capture shock back at my own monsters. Maybe it would break control. Maybe it would drive them mad. Maybe it would simply explode. None of those options improved my afternoon. The mantises rushed. They moved like shards of broken sunlight. One leapt over the outer trench. Another cut through a stone barricade with one arm. A third deflected 3 arrows, and the arrows curved back toward Riley. She ducked, rolled, and glared at me like this was somehow my social planning failure. I could not use the bell. I could not use direct attacks. So I used embarrassment. "Goblins," I shouted, "ugly mirror plan." The goblins screamed with joy. From the towers they dropped hundreds of polished trash plates, dented shields, shiny spoon panels, and broken mirror tiles tied to spider silk, the air filled with reflections. The mantises froze for half a heartbeat, each one seeing dozens of false bodies, false blades, false threats. Mirror mantises copied danger. So I gave them too much danger to understand. They sliced at reflections. Their own copied attacks bounced between shiny plates. One mantis copied the movement of another mantis, which copied the first mantis, and both became trapped in a ridiculous dance that cut every hanging plate around them into confetti. But confusion was not capture. I needed them still. That was where the slimes came in. Purple festival slimes, still full of neutralized frenzy pollen, launched themselves from catapults. They splattered across the mirror mantises in bright glowing sheets. The mantises tried to copy the slimes, but there was no attack to reflect. There was only sticky happiness and poison-cleaning goo. For the first time, the mirror mantises hesitated. Then the skeletons walked forward without weapons. That made everyone gasp. Mirror mantises copied attacks. A skeleton with no weapon and no fear gave them nothing worth copying. The undead guards surrounded them, not striking, not blocking, simply stepping into their paths again and again. Mantises could cut them down, and some did, bones scattered, but every skeleton reassembled behind them, patient and rude. The mantises grew slower. Their mirrors clouded under slime. Their blades stuck in bone cages. I walked forward. The Red Commander shouted, "Do not let him touch them." Too late. I placed the staff against the nearest mantis, not ringing it, not swinging it. I whispered into the bell. Sound does not always need volume. Sometimes it only needs direction. The bell gave one tiny chime, so soft it could have been a coin touching glass. The mantis heard it through the slime pressed against its shell. Capture light crawled across its body like dawn over a broken mirror. It tried to copy the capture. There was nothing to copy. Because I was not attacking it. I was offering it a job. One by one, the mirror mantises folded their blades and bowed their reflected faces. The crowd stood in silence. Even the Red Commander looked less certain now. I smiled at him. "Great choice," I said. "I needed inspectors." "Inspectors?" Riley asked. "Anything they reflect twice is dangerous." Nora stared at the mantises, then at me. "You are going to use legendary murder bugs as safety mirrors." "Public safety is important." "That is not public safety. That is madness with furniture." The Red Commander's soldiers shifted. Their confidence had started leaking out through their boots. Their leader still had one cage left. This one had not been rolled forward with the others. It sat on a wagon farther back, wrapped in black chains. The horses pulling it trembled so hard the wagon wheels shook. Nora's expression changed. "Ethan." I heard it too. A heartbeat. Deep, slow, and wet. The Red Commander's smile returned, but now it looked desperate. "Your city is clever," he said. "Let us see if clever survives hunger." He cut the black chains. The cage did not open. It burst. A hunger ogre climbed out, taller than the gate, with gray skin stretched over a round belly covered in mouths. Not one mouth, dozens. Big mouths, little mouths, mouths where elbows should be, mouths blinking open across its shoulders and chest. Every mouth whispered the same word. Food. The air changed. People clutched their stomachs, monsters backed away, slimes flattened, wolves whimpered. Even the giant behind the wall took one step forward, suddenly alert. Hunger ogres did not just eat bodies. They ate morale. They made armies feel empty. They made cities feel like pantries. They turned courage into appetite and appetite into fear. The Red Commander pointed at my gate. "Fade." The ogre charged. The ground shook. The first mouth opened wide enough to swallow a cart. My first instinct was to capture it. My second instinct was to not be an idiot. A creature ruled by endless hunger would not become a worker just because I rang a bell. It might become my worker and still eat everything I loved. Ownership was not the same as usefulness. So I needed to change what it was hungry for. "Nora," I said, "can hunger be tricked?" "Yes." "Can it be tricked fast?" "No." "Goblins," I shouted, "bring the bad soup." Every goblin froze. That terrified the crowd more than the ogre. Goblin bad soup was not food. It was a weapon against hope. It had been banned from 4 camps, 1 mine, and a spider nest that did not even have noses. I had saved 3 barrels because throwing away dangerous things felt wasteful. The goblins rolled the barrels out while crying, not from fear, from pride. Hunger ogre smashed through the outer barricade. Skeletons tried to slow it, but mouths opened across its knees and ate their shields. Wolves tried to distract it, but the mouths snapped at their tails. Slimes threw themselves at its feet, and the ogre absorbed them like snacks, then burped bubbles. That made me angry. Eating my workers was rude. Eating my slimes was personal. I stood in front of the gate with 3 barrels of bad soup behind me. The ogre lowered its many mouths and whispered, "Food." I whispered back, "Regret." The goblins launched the barrels. They shattered against the ogre's main mouth. The smell hit the battlefield. Birds fell out of the sky. A horse fainted. Riley wrapped her scarf around her face and still looked betrayed by the concept of air. The hunger ogre swallowed. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then every mouth on its body frowned. That should not have been possible, but it was incredibly satisfying. The ogre staggered. Its hunger, which had never met anything it did not want, had just encountered something it deeply wanted to forget. The mouths argued with each other. Some demanded more food. Others demanded a new body. One mouth near its shoulder began praying. Now the mirror mantises moved. They stepped around the ogre in a circle, reflecting its own twisted appetite back at it again and again. Each reflection showed not food outside, but hunger inside. The ogre saw itself as a feast it could never finish. It roared. Then it tried to bite its own arm. Perfect. I rang the bell, but not to capture. I rang it through the slimes that had been eaten. The ogre had absorbed them, yes, but slimes did not die quickly inside stomachs. They cleaned. They dissolved poison. They survived places no creature should survive because they had the noble confidence of wet laundry. Deep inside the hunger ogre, my slimes heard the bell. They expanded. The ogre's belly bulged. Purple cleaning light shone through its gray skin. Mouths coughed. Slimes poured out of every opening, dragging spoiled hunger magic with them like black tar. The ogre shrank. Not in size. In presence. The morale-eating pressure vanished. People breathed again. Monsters stood taller. The giant behind the wall leaned down and watched with obvious curiosity, as if considering whether the ogre was now acceptable to step on. The Red Commander screamed for his soldiers to attack. None moved. I walked toward the hunger ogre. Its main mouth opened, weak and furious. Food. I held up one remaining jar of goblin soup concentrate. It closed every mouth. Work, I said. The monster bell rang. The capture light struggled. The ogre was stronger than anything I had tried to tame that day. It resisted with empty need and ancient rage. But the slimes inside it cleaned the corruption. The mirror mantises reflected its frenzy back inward. The skeletons held its legs, and the goblins waved the soup jar like a holy threat. At last, the capture circle locked. The hunger ogre fell to one knee. The whole valley shook. I pointed toward the city dump, where broken stone, spoiled supplies, failed goblin inventions, and useless monster bones had been piling up for weeks. Eat trash, I ordered. The ogre turned. It crawled to the dump. Then it began devouring garbage with tears in half its eyes. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the most terrifying monster on the battlefield became municipal waste disposal. Nara slowly covered her face. Riley leaned on her bow and laughed so hard she had to sit down. The Red Commander dropped his sword. That was when I knew he had finally understood. He had not brought weapons. He had brought me infrastructure. The soldiers in red armor began retreating, not running, not yet. They were trying to keep dignity alive, dragging it behind them like a dead goat. I could have let them go. That would have been merciful. Instead, I chose educational. The silver carrion birds rose from the quarry, now wearing tiny message tubes made from reed and bone. They circled over the retreating army and dropped little notes written by goblins. The notes said things like, "Thank you for the birds, thank you for the teeth moles, and please send more snacks with legs." One note just had a drawing of the Red Commander being bitten by a pie. It was not tactically necessary. It was spiritually necessary. The Red Army broke into a run. Only their commander remained, shaking with rage. "You think this makes you a king?" he shouted. I looked around. At the repaired wall. At the new tunnel crew. At the sky birds circling above. At the mimic pies guarding supply baskets. At the mirror mantises standing like shining statues. At the hunger ogre eating garbage while looking personally offended by flavor. "No," I said, "it makes me hard to rob." He mounted his horse. "You will make enemies you cannot tame. Probably. You will face monsters that do not want jobs. Everyone wants something. Not everything can be useful." That made me smile. There it was. The sentence every powerful idiot eventually said before becoming fertilizer for my plans. I stepped closer, muddy, bruised, exhausted, and happier than I should have been. "You still think useful means obedient," I said. "That is why you keep losing." His horse backed away from me. Smart horse. The commander fled. This time nobody stopped him. I wanted him to carry the story. Not the true story, of course. People like him never tell the true story. He would say my city was cursed. He would say monsters crawled from every shadow. He would say I turned his strongest beasts against him with forbidden tricks and disgusting soup. Good. Fear is cheaper than walls. But rumors are wild monsters too. If you let them run loose, they bite the wrong people. So I captured those as well. For sunset, I had silver birds flying toward every trade road with short messages tied to their legs. Not threats, not boasts, just simple facts. Monster City survived an attack during the gate opening. Monster City bought ore, grain, cloth, tools, and medicine. Monster City protected workers of every species. Monster City paid in clean water, repaired roads, safe mines, and monster-made goods that did not explode unless clearly labeled. That last line was Nora's demand. The birds carried news faster than riders. By nightfall, travelers would hear that the strange Valley Kingdom was not a ruin, not a cult, not a goblin accident with flags, but a place where even disasters came out employed. While the city repaired the celebration, I inspected the new workers. The silver birds refused to land in neat rows, so I assigned them to the tallest towers and told goblins not to teach them insults. This failed instantly. Within an hour, one bird could mimic Riley saying my name in the exact tone she used when I did something dangerous. The Iron Joe burrowers carved emergency tunnels under every district. I marked paths with slime lamps, skeleton signs, and goblin warning faces. Burrowers also found a vein of blue crystal under the eastern hill, which the kobolds celebrated by licking it and declaring it spicy. Mimic pies needed rules. They understood guard, bite, and no biting citizens unless citizens were stealing. The problem was that they considered smelling food suspicious. We solved this by placing them inside locked chests labeled not pies. Any thief foolish enough to open a chest labeled not pies deserved the education. Mirror mantises became my favorite new headache. They reflected attacks, lies, and sometimes bad hair. When a merchant tried to pass painted rocks as gems, a mantis reflected his face across its shell and showed him sweating before he even spoke. When a goblin claimed he had not stolen wheels from a cart, the mantis showed 6 reflections of him stealing 7 wheels, which raised questions about the missing extra wheel. As for the hunger ogre, it was shockingly polite once full of garbage. It sat at the dump eating broken things and producing smooth black bricks from its lower mouths. Nora tested one brick and discovered it resisted fire, acid, and goblin cooking. By the second hour, we had a new building material. By the third hour, goblins were trying to feed the ogre experimental furniture to see what kind of bricks came out. By the fourth hour, I banned experiments involving chairs that screamed. The ceremony was delayed, but not ruined. Actually, it became better. Because now the guests had a story. Nobody remembers a perfect gate opening. They remember the day a city got attacked by sky poison, tooth moles, evil pastries, mirror insects, and a stomach demon, then turned all of them into public services before dinner. The farmers returned first. Then the merchants. Then the players who had once mocked me from outside safe zones. They stood in the square, looking at the monster crews moving with purpose, and I could see the exact moment shame tried to enter their faces and got lost because envy was blocking the door. A young player near the fountain pointed at a slime polishing stone. "I killed hundreds of those," he whispered. A goblin carrying blueprints walked past him and muttered something rude. The player did not argue. That was growth. Grant returned just before sunset, which ruined the emotional timing because he had already made his dramatic exit. He walked through the gate road, saw the repaired wall, the flying birds, the mirror mantises, the ogre eating garbage, and me missing one shoe. His face hardened. What happened? Minor delay. Why is there a giant monster eating trash? Major improvement. He stared at the ogre. The ogre stared back with 14 mouths. Grant wisely chose not to challenge municipal services. I heard a red army was coming, he said. They came. And they donated. Riley laughed again. Grant looked at her, then at me. For once, he did not mock the monsters. He watched them, really watched them. The burrowers strengthening the foundation, the slimes cleaning poison, the goblins measuring gate hinges. The skeletons standing guard with repaired shields, the birds circling, the mantises reflecting weak spots in armor plates for the smiths. His hand tightened on his sword. Not with anger, with realization. He had spent his whole life becoming stronger by defeating enemies. I had become stronger by refusing to let enemies stay enemies. That difference was now taller than the walls. Ethan, he said quietly, what happens when something comes that you truly cannot capture? I looked at the northern mountains, where the clouds gathered like bruises. Then I capture the battlefield around it. Grant frowned. I pointed at the city. You do not always need to own the monster. Sometimes you own its food, its path, its fear, its mirror, its shadow, or the hole it wants to crawl into. Nora sighed. He says things like that and then jumps into tunnels. Only useful tunnels. There is no such category. The city bells rang sunset. Not alarm bells. Opening bells. Every creature stopped working for a moment. Every human looked toward the central gate. The gate had taken weeks to build, and one afternoon to nearly lose. It stood between two towers of black brick made from ogre-refined trash, reinforced by iron-joe tunnels, polished by slimes until it reflected the sky, framed with spider silk banners. And guarded by skeletons, whose shields now carried silver bird feathers. Above the arch, goblins had carved words into the stone. Nora saw them and grabbed my sleeve. "Did you approve that?" I looked up. The carving said, "Welcome to Monster City. Please do not be delicious." I considered it. It has personality. It has legal consequences. We are not doing that kind of story. Good. Riley wiped dust from her face and took her place beside the gate lever. Grant stood near the road, pretending he was not staying to watch. Nora held a repair crystal in one hand and a fire extinguisher slime in the other, because she trusted nothing and was usually rewarded for it. I looked at the crowd. Humans, monsters, players, farmers, merchants, former enemies, current problems, future employees. They waited for a speech. I hated speeches. Speeches are traps. Say too much and people expect wisdom every time. Say too little and people invent meaning, which is cheaper. So I raised the repaired monster bell staff. The silver birds circled lower. The wolves lifted their heads. The slimes glowed purple and gold in the sunset. The hunger ogre stopped chewing long enough to listen. I rang the bell once. This time the sound did not command. It did not capture. It did not threaten. It simply traveled through every tunnel, every wall, every web bridge, every bone tower, every monster den, and every human street. It told the city one thing. Begin. Riley pulled the lever. The central gate opened. City below cheered as the central gate opened. Humans and monsters moved together through the streets, messy, loud, strange, and alive. A goblin stole a ribbon from the ceremony and got chased by a spider. Slime accidentally cleaned paint off a banner. A skeleton saluted a soup pot. The giant sneezed and flattened a decorative arch, which the crowd decided was a blessing because nobody wanted to tell it otherwise. For one perfect minute, I let myself enjoy it. Then the wolves on the northern ridge howled. Not a warning of attack. A discovery. Riley's expression changed first. She listened to the pattern, then looked at me. Scouts found something beyond the Ash Mountains, she said. Nora groaned, no. What kind of something? I asked. Riley's smile returned, sharp and bright. A city made of monsters, not captured, organized. The staff warmed in my palm. Far beyond the mountains, under a sky stained red by sunset, something answered my monster bell with a sound that was not an echo. A horn, deep, ancient, and amused. The crowd below kept cheering, unaware that the world had just become bigger again. I looked at the monster kingdom I had built from trash mobs, bad jokes, and every weak creature the world had thrown away. I looked at the slimes, goblins, wolves, skeletons, kobolds, spiders, trolls, beetles, boars, birds, and the giant standing like a living wall behind us. Everyone else had killed monsters for experience. I had captured them for labor. Then I had given that labor purpose. Now a monster city beyond the mountains had heard us. I smiled because part of me was exhausted, part of me was terrified, and the worst part of me was already planning. Open the northern road, I said. Riley laughed softly. Nora muttered that she hated all of us. Below, a goblin tested the new gate lever and dropped the ceremonial banner onto a visiting noble's head. The city roared with laughter. And somewhere beyond the Ash Mountains, the horn sounded again.